the Department of Justice in America is undoubtedly the 400-pound gorilla, but the way they go about their business tends to be to tie your arms and your legs behind your back before starting money.
Extortion by America, not law enforcement. The words of a member of the so-called Natwest 3 jailed over Enron. David Birmingham, speaking as Standard Chartered agrees to pay $340 million to settle claims by New York regulators that the bank hid as much as $250 billion in transactions linked to Iran. Full details still to follow, but shareholders so far applauding the deal. The stock trading in Hong Kong up nearly 6% in the wake of the settlement. On now to the Eurozone. Today's FT reporting that Greece is seeking an extension to its austerity programme as the country buckles under the strain of spending cuts. Let's get to Tobias Blattner, European economist at Daiwa Capital Markets. Morning to you, Tobias. Will they and should they get this extension in Greece?
Well, they should probably, I guess, because given that I think we've seen the depth of the recession that we have right now, all of the delay in implementing the reforms due to the elections that we had. But will they? I'm not sure, because simply, I mean, they claim that they would get the money themselves. It's about another 20 billion that they would need for this 2-year delay. But we're not sure that even if they would get the money themselves and not from the EU and the IMF, I think there's still the issue, obviously, from the IMF about debt sustainability, that it can actually disperse the current second bailout, and therefore we need that sustainability. And I think as it looks right now, this is something that the IMF is really critical about, so we're not even sure whether this will really happen.
I want to look at the ECB next week, but before we do, just a quick word from you on the GDP numbers yesterday. Did you take heart from the gain of 0.3 in Germany, or do you think that's it now and it's going to be pretty bad in the second half?
That's clearly it, I think, for now. We have seen that the economy is slowing down. Obviously, still very good for Germany, still doing fine. Also, France, I think, escaping a recession for a second quarter. That's all good news. But I think now when we look at the sentiment indicators that we got already for the start of the third quarter, then I think for the second half of this year, we all expect but at least a 0% growth in the core, but very likely, I think, also a recession in the core economies.
What will we get from Mr. Draghi next week?
Well, I mean, it's not sure whether next week he will already announce something, but at least I think at the press conference in September we would expect that obviously he announces all these critical details that I think the markets are really waiting for about the new bond buying program. And what he delivers there obviously is a big question, in particular I think what kind of bonds he will buy. And I think there the question is, will he go beyond the 2-year element of the curve? Will he also buy 3-year bonds or so? I think all of this is really unclear right now, and also whether they will sterilize or not the bond purchases. I think these are critical questions that will be important, I think, for the effectiveness of these new bond buying plan by the ECB.
Okay, Tobias, many thanks. World news on Reuters this morning. Muslim countries set to suspend Syria's membership of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. The move, due at a summit in Riyadh, is opposed by Syria's main ally, Iran. The country's former prime minister, who defected last week, has declared that Assad's regime is collapsing.
I assure you, through my experience and the position I used to fill, that the regime is collapsing psychologically, financially, economically, with cracks in its military power.
Australia is calling on the rest of the world to match its tough new anti-tobacco marketing laws. Cigarettes and tobacco products will have to be sold in plain unbranded packets from December 1st. Australia's highest court has dismissed the challenge from global tobacco giants, claiming the rules ignore their intellectual property rights. And China is cutting coal output targets by as much as 7% in its top 3 producing regions. The reduction is aimed at easing a supply glut built up as the economy slows. Staying in Asia, reports that Apple's main supplier Foxconn is shifting production out of China. Reuters' John Gordon in Hong Kong has the story. John, another sign that the era of cheap China is coming to an end?
Yeah, not as cheap as it used to be, clearly, Axel. You know, this year we've seen labor shortages, we've seen better working conditions, a more educated workforce, and a move away from that forced overtime that's really been characteristic of the labor out here. So part of the secret recipe of all those super phones in our pockets has been that affordable labor. Where else in Asia can you find the scale? Not a lot of places. Indonesia, though, is on the tip of everyone's tongues. You know, it's got great demographics. Everyone loves the investment story. The trade minister there slipping up saying, he kind of jumped the gun here, saying Foxconn is considering a $5 to $10 billion investment over the next decade to set up shop there in that populous nation. Now, they would start out with a small plant near Jakarta. Early 2013 would be the start date there. It's not risk-free, though. There are a lot of drawbacks to working in Indonesia compared to China. They've got really a horrific infrastructure there. Basics like power, water, public transport, all not guaranteed, very difficult to get done. Logistics also very, very difficult. We've got ports that are clogged back. You've got red tape everywhere. And also you have to deal with bribery, just part of doing business there. So customers of Foxconn, like Apple, don't tolerate late shipments. So working in Indonesia will be a challenge for anyone, even someone with Foxconn with that amount of history behind it.
All right. Thanks a lot, John. Social Pulse is our look at what people we follow are reading. And from the BBC to the New York Times, Mark Thompson is named the CEO of the Times. His reputation as the turnaround man with a keen sense of what consumers want in the digital age and need in the digital age, very much the reason for his selection. On this day in history in 1945, millions of people around the world cheered the surrender of Japan to the Allies, effectively bringing the Second World War to a close. VJ Day is celebrated in Europe on August 15th, but the US marks the formal signing of Japan's unconditional surrender on September 2nd. That is it. Our picture of the day will leave you with this. Shows researchers examining the anatomy of the biggest Burmese python yet found in Florida. The reptile, measuring 17 feet and 7 inches, was captured in the Everglades National Park this spring. I'm Axel Threlfall. This is Reuters.